another Swift tutorial. In today's video, we're going to be looking at how we can play audio or music in our iOS app. So we're going to be building this app you see here. We have this button that we can tap. When we tap it, we get music playback. And of course, we can tap it again and the music stops, and so on and so forth. So that said, make sure you drop a like down below, helps out the video quite a bit. Get your Xcode ready, subscribe if you're new, and let's jump right into it. So as always, we're going to start by creating a new Xcode project. We're going to stick with a single view application template, and we'll call this project a player, save it on our desktop, and get into it. So first things first, we need to bring in some audio to actually play. So I downloaded this MP3 ahead of time. So we're just going to drag this in and drop it there like so. You'll get this window to import the file. Make sure this top option is checked. It basically copies the resource to your project instead of just referencing it from where you're dragging it in from. And with that said, let's expand our Xcode window and design our user interface. So to design our user interface, we're going to navigate to our main.storyboard. We're going to start by setting the background color of this to black. We'll bring in a image view and drop it here like so. We'll set the image to be a music note. Whoops, let's try that one more time. A music note. And let's apply some constraints to this by selecting it and then coming down here and selecting this option. We're going to be 10, 10, 10 from the top, left, and right, and we'll set the height to be 200. The next thing we want is a button that is going to be tapped to play and pause the music, rather play and stop the music. So let's bring a button in, drop it there. And we can also apply some constraints to this by selecting the button, coming down here, and choose this to basically center the button horizontally and vertically in the container, which for this case is this whole screen. We can also change the label on this button to be play. Next, we want to go to our view controller, and that's not it, our view controller, and we need to add three things in here. Rather two things in here. The first thing we need is an outlet to our button so we can change its title text when the person taps it from play to stop and vice versa from stop to play. And we also need an IB action that gets called once the user taps the button. So we're going to create an IB outlet and it's going to be called button. It'll be a UI button. And we're also going to add an IB action called did tap button. Let's go wire these up in the storyboard and then we'll get into the meat of how we actually play audio on iOS. So we're gonna come here, right click this, drag from the button to the button, from the action to the button. In this drop down you want to select touch up inside, which is a normal tap gesture. That's it. Let's go back to the view controller. And before we actually get into AV Foundation, which is the framework where you can access all the audio stuff, let's select our simulator and hit Command R to build and run. And I think that's this one, yep. And we should see our user interface. So like I mentioned, we're going to be working with AV Foundation, which is a framework provided by Apple. And let's get rid of my antivirus pop-up. But it's a framework provided by Apple that includes all audio and video manipulation and playback and other objects. And there's actually quite a bit of things in there. So we're just going to focus on audio playback. So let's import AV Foundation. The object we're going to use to play back audio is an AV audio player. So we're going to create a variable, which is an AV audio player optional. And the reason it's optional is because we are going to try to instantiate this player with a URL, which is a local file URL to our audio.mp3 that we brought in. And if the URL for some reason is incorrect, the initialization fails. So we're going to start by creating this like this, basically. So when the person taps the button, we're going to first check if the player is nil. Rather, we're going to try to unwrap it, and we're going to say if the player is playing, we're going to want to stop playback. Otherwise, we want to set up player and play. So to set up the player, we need to do a couple things. The first thing we need to do is implement a do-catch block, because when we attempt to set up some player stuff, objects, it can actually throw an error. So we need to catch those errors in this do-catch block. So we're just going to print out if an error occurs, we're going to say something went wrong. And in the do part of the block, we need to do two things. The first thing is set up our AV audio session, which is a global thing across your app, which specifies what type of playback you want. And we need to set up our player. So let's do the AV audio session first. We're going to say AV audio session dot shared instance. We're going to set its mode to be default. And you'll see an error pop up here in just a sec. That's because this call can throw an error. So we need to prefix this with a try. And we want another setup function on the AV audio session, and it's going to be set active true. And we want notify others on deactivation for the options. Next, we're going to set up the actual player. And to set up the player, we need to get a URL to our audio.mp3. And we're going to get that via the following. We're going to say let URL string, which is a path to the actual file, is bundle.main dot path for resource, and the resource name is audio, and the type is mp3. Notice you don't actually type in audio.mp3. You just type in the file name and you provide the file type, which is the extension more often than not at the end of the file name. In here, we're going to say guard let URL equals URL, because when you attempt to get this URL string, sorry, let's name this correctly, guard let URL string is URL string. The reason you need to do this is when you try to get this URL, it may come back as an empty, as a nil, because that object does not exist at any path. Next, what we want to do is try to create the player, which is player equals try to create an AV audio player with contents of URL. Create a URL object with contents of a URL file path. Here we're going to paste in URL string. And let's see, the next thing we need to do here is unwrap the player and then actually start playback. So we're going to say guard let player equals player. And let's spell player correctly because that's important. And we're going to say player.play. So that's how we actually set up playbacks. Let me zoom out and go over this one more time. So basically we get a URL string to our audio file. Then we set these global properties on the AV audio session. We unwrap the URL string. We use the URL string to try to create and instantiate an AV audio player. We unwrap the player after that because we're trying to make sure that it actually got created properly. And then we call the play function on our player. And in the if part of the block, we're going to basically say player.stop, because we know that the player is not nil because we unwrapped it, and we're saying player is playing. So we can call player.stop in here, which should stop our audio. So let's hit Command R to build and run and see what we get. So we're going to hit this button, and we get the audio playback. We can hit it again, and the audio stops. But if you notice, this button still says play. So what we can do here is in this if part of the block, we can say button dot set title is stop for the normal state. And also in this part of the block, we can say player or button set title is play. And if we build and run, you'll see that the text on this will change. So now we're playing it. And actually, I did it backwards. Once we start playing, we want this to say stop. And once we are already playing, we want this to say play. Let's try that one more time. Now we can stop it. And yeah, there you have it. So that's how you basically play any audio. There are pretty simple ways to just get the audio from the internet if you have like a web URL. It's essentially almost the exact same code, but the URL would be a remote HTTP URL. So that being said, that's how you play audio in your iOS app in Swift. If you like the video and haven't done so already, make sure you leave a like down below. Helps out the video and channel a lot. If you're new, subscribe for Swift videos, iOS dev, and other tech thoughts along the way. Leave a comment if you had any issues, have any questions, requests. Always love hearing from you guys. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next one.